The rain was coming down harder than usual that evening. The streets were half empty, and most people hurried past with umbrellas or bags over their heads. But she didn't rush. She walked slowly, letting the rain hit her coat as if she needed it to wash away something she couldn't name. Her driver had offered to wait, but she told him to go. She just wanted a few quiet minutes alone. She stopped outside a small cafe tucked between two old bookshops. The lights inside looked warm, and the smell of coffee drifted out each time the door opened. Without thinking too much, she pushed the door and stepped in. The bell above it chimed softly. The sound felt welcoming, like she had just entered a different world. Inside, only a few people sat scattered around the room. A young man behind the counter looked up when he saw her. He had kind eyes, the kind that didn't try to look deep but somehow were. He smiled and said, "Evening. Rough weather out there, huh?" She gave a faint smile and nodded, pushing back a strand of wet hair. "Yeah, you could say that." "What can I get you?" he asked. His tone was easy, not forced, and that made her feel oddly comfortable. She looked up at the menu, but her mind was blank. "Just something warm," she said quietly. "Maybe a cappuccino." "Coming right up," he replied, moving quickly but calmly. She noticed he hummed softly while preparing the drink. Something about that sound was peaceful. It reminded her of the time before her life became filled with meetings, deadlines, and constant pressure. She found a seat near the window. The rain tapped softly against the glass, and for a while she just stared outside. Her phone buzzed with messages. Business partners, board members, and assistants asking about tomorrow's presentation. She turned it face down on the table. For once, she didn't want to be the woman everyone expected her to be. She just wanted to be someone sitting quietly in a small cafe on a rainy evening. When the coffee arrived, he placed it gently in front of her. The foam was shaped like a heart. She looked up surprised. "That's nice," she said with a small laugh. "How special," he said. "It's my way of making rainy days better." "Does it work?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said, smiling again. "Depends on the person." She laughed softly, feeling her guard drop a little. It had been a long time since someone talked to her like this, not because of who she was, but just because they wanted to. She took a sip and the warmth spread through her. It wasn't just the drink. It was the feeling of being somewhere real where nobody cared about her title or her success. After a few minutes, she reached into her bag and froze. Her wallet wasn't there. She remembered leaving it in her office drawer before she rushed out earlier. She looked up, embarrassed. I think I forgot my wallet," she said quietly. "I can come back tomorrow and pay." Before she could finish, he waved his hand. "It's fine. You can pay next time. Or don't. Consider it on the house." Her eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to." He shook his head. "It's just coffee." "You looked like you needed it." She didn't know what to say. She was used to people trying to impress her or gain something from her, but this stranger didn't even ask her name. He didn't care who she was. He simply saw a tired woman in the rain and decided to show kindness. "Thank you," she said softly, and meant it. "No problem," he said. "I'm Adil, by the way," she smiled. "Nice to meet you, Adil." He didn't ask for her name, and she didn't offer it. She liked it that way. For the next half hour, she sat there sipping her coffee, occasionally glancing at him as he worked behind the counter. He seemed to treat every customer the same, with respect and a kind of quiet attention that made people feel seen. He joked with the elderly couple in the corner, complimented a young boy's drawing, and remembered a regular's favorite order without being told. There was no arrogance in him, just simple, genuine care. When she finally stood up to leave, the rain had slowed down. She walked to the counter to say goodbye. "Thanks for the coffee. And for being kind," she said. He looked up from the espresso machine and smiled. "You're welcome. Sometimes people just need a warm drink and a place to breathe." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, you're right." As she stepped outside, she turned once more to look at the cafe. Through the window, she could see him wiping down the counter, still humming quietly. Something about the sight stayed with her. She didn't know why, but she felt lighter than she had all day. That night, when she returned to her apartment, she couldn't stop thinking about the cafe. The warmth, the music, his words. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. The polished woman everyone respected, but few really knew. Beneath the tailored suit and confident smile was someone tired of pretending she had it all figured out. The next morning, she sat through a board meeting surrounded by people talking about profits, mergers, and growth. She nodded and gave her input. but her mind drifted back to the cafe and the quiet calm she felt there. When the meeting ended, she decided she'd go again that evening. Just for a cup of coffee, she told herself. Just for a break. When she arrived that evening, the cafe was busier, but she found the same seat by the window. Adil noticed her and waved lightly. "Hey, rainy day customer," he said with a grin. "Back for round 2? She laughed. "Guess I am. Wallet this time?" he teased. "Yes," she said, handing him cash before he could joke further. "But you didn't have to do that yesterday." "I didn't mind," he said. "Besides, I got lucky." "You came back," she couldn't help but smile. There was something effortless about the way he talked. No pressure, no performance, just sincerity. They started chatting little by little about small things. Coffee beans, music, favorite movies. Nothing deep, but it felt good. Easy. She came back again a few days later, and then again the week after. Each time, he greeted her the same way, as if he'd been waiting for her without ever saying it out loud. They talked about everything except work. She liked that he never asked what she did. It made her feel normal again. One evening, after closing time, she stayed a little longer, helping him stack chairs and clean the tables. He told her how he worked part-time at the cafe while finishing his degree. He talked about his dreams, to one day open his own small coffee place, not fancy, just honest, where people could come to feel seen and cared for. She listened closely, admiring his simplicity. It wasn't about ambition or fame, it was about purpose. He didn't even realize how much his words reminded her of why she started her company years ago, before it became all about numbers. When she left that night, the streetlights glowed softly through the mist, and she found herself smiling for no reason. She hadn't done that in a long time. Days turned into weeks, and the cafe became her quiet escape. No board meetings, no phone calls, just warm lights, soft laughter, and the man who somehow made her forget the weight of her own world. He never treated her differently. He didn't try to impress her. He didn't know her story, but he treated her with the kind of respect that didn't need explanation. Sometimes he'd save her favorite pastry without asking. Other times he'd leave a small note on her cup that said things like, "You look happier today," or "Don't forget to rest." It was strange. She was used to being admired for her power, but with him she was simply appreciated for being herself. One rainy evening, much like the first, she arrived late. The cafe was almost empty. He was closing up, but when he saw her, he smiled and unlocked the door again. "You didn't have to," she said. "I know," he replied, wiping his hands on a towel. "But you look like you could use a cup of coffee." She laughed softly. "Always." As they sat talking, he said something she'd never forget. "You know, people walk in here every day carrying invisible weights. Some think they're not enough. Some think they're too much. But everyone deserves a little kindness. Everyone deserves to be treated like they matter. Like a queen, even if they don't think they are." The words hit her harder than he realized. For years she had built an empire, but somewhere along the way, she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen, not as a CEO, but as a person. When she went home that night, his words replayed in her mind over and over. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know the world she came from, but somehow he had given her something far rarer than admiration. He had given her peace, and deep down she knew she would come back, not just for the coffee, but for the way he made her feel human again. The next few weeks passed quietly, yet something about her life began to change. Every evening after work, she found herself heading toward the same little cafe on the corner. It wasn't planned. She just felt drawn there, like it had become her safe place away from all the noise in her world. Her days were always full of meetings, numbers, and decisions. People spoke to her with respect, but she could always tell that behind the polite smiles were expectations and sometimes fear. Everyone wanted something from her, advice, approval, or opportunity. But inside that cafe, she was just a woman with a cup of coffee, and that was enough. Adil greeted her the same way every time. No questions about work, no formal tone, just an easy smile and the same line that had become his way of welcoming her. "Rough day?" he'd say, and she'd laugh softly. Something like that. Their conversations grew longer. They talked about little things, how the rain always made the city feel calmer, how music could change a person's mood, and how some people just needed to be listened to once in a while. He told her stories about his late mother, who taught him that kindness could be stronger than pride. He said she used to tell him, "Never treat people based on what they have. Treat them based on how they make you feel." Those words stuck with him. Maybe that's why he treated every person who walked into the cafe as if they mattered. One evening after everyone left, she stayed behind as he wiped the tables. The rain outside was soft and steady, and the cafe lights made everything look golden. She helped him stack a few chairs just to pass the time. "You know," she said, watching him, "I've met so many people who talk about success, but very few who talk about peace. You seem to have both." He smiled at that. "Peace, yes. Success, not yet." She tilted her head. "You don't think peace is a kind of success?" He thought for a moment. "Maybe you're right, but I'd still like to build something of my own one day. My dream is to open a cafe that feels like home for everyone who walks in. Not fancy, just real." His words made her heart warm. She admired his honesty. There was something about the way he dreamed, not big and loud, but quietly, with faith and patience. She wanted to tell him that she could help him achieve that dream in a day if she wanted to. But she stopped herself. She didn't want him to see her that way. She wanted this connection to stay pure, so instead she said, "If you ever open that place, I'll be your first customer." "Deal," he said with a grin. After that night, their connection deepened. She visited almost every day, sometimes even bringing homemade cookies or new books for him to read. They shared music, exchanged stories, and laughed like old friends. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as a powerful woman, not as a leader, but as someone who could simply exist without proving anything. One day, when she entered the cafe, she looked more tired than usual. Her company was going through a rough patch. A deal that was supposed to secure hundreds of jobs had fallen through, and the pressure from investors was building. She tried to keep her composure, but her eyes gave away the exhaustion she carried. Adil noticed it the moment she walked in. "You look like you've been fighting the world," he said softly. She smiled weakly. "Feels like it." He poured her coffee and sat across from her, something he rarely did during work hours. "You don't have to talk about it," he said, "but if you want to, I'm listening." That simple line broke the wall she had built around herself. She found herself talking without realizing how much she was revealing. She didn't give details, of course. She didn't mention her position or her company. But she talked about the pressure of responsibility, about how lonely it felt to always be strong. He listened silently, not trying to fix anything, just being there. When she finished, he said, "You know, sometimes people who carry the heaviest loads don't realize they're allowed to rest too." She looked at him, eyes soft. "And what if resting means disappointing everyone? Then maybe you've been trying to please the wrong people," he said simply. That night, those words stayed with her. She went home and stood by her window, looking at the city lights, wondering how someone who had so little could have such deep wisdom. Maybe peace didn't come from power or money. It came from understanding what really mattered. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew naturally. Some evenings, he'd walk her to her car, holding an umbrella over her head while joking about how she never remembered to bring one. Other times, they'd just sit in silence, watching the rain outside without needing to speak. He treated her gently, respectfully, with the kind of care that felt effortless. It wasn't flattery. It wasn't interest based on attraction. It was something deeper, simple, genuine appreciation. One evening, as she prepared to leave, he said something that made her heart stop for a second. "You deserve to be treated like a queen," he said quietly, almost without thinking. She blinked, unsure how to respond. "A queen?" she repeated, trying to hide her smile. "Yeah," he said with a shrug. "Not because of what you have, but because of how you carry yourself. You're calm, strong, but you still notice small things. That's rare." She didn't know how to answer. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Most people respected her out of fear or admiration, but this was different. This was kindness without motive. That night she couldn't sleep. His words replayed in her mind. "You deserve to be treated like a queen." He had no idea how close to the truth he was. The next morning, her assistant asked why she was smiling during a tense board meeting. She brushed it off. "Just thinking about something nice," she said. Though she knew it wasn't something, it was someone. As days went by, she started noticing little details about him. How he always looked people in the eye when speaking. How he gave free coffee to the homeless man who came in every Thursday. How he'd stay late to clean even when no one was watching. He had no idea how rare that was. One evening, she brought him a small gift, a notebook with a leather cover. "For your future cafe," she said. He looked surprised. "You remembered?" "Of course," she said. "Every dream deserves to be written down." He smiled as he ran his fingers over the cover. "You're something else," he said quietly. "So are you," she replied. Their friendship was different. It wasn't fast or dramatic. It grew slowly, like trust should. But underneath, something deeper was forming, something neither of them dared to name yet. She didn't tell him who she really was. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she was scared the truth would change everything. She liked being treated as just a woman who loved coffee and conversation. She didn't want to become the CEO in his eyes, but secrets have a way of making people uneasy, even when they start with good intentions. Sometimes she caught herself almost confessing, especially when he talked about honesty and openness, but then she'd stop. Maybe she just wanted a little more time before the truth stepped in and spoiled the simplicity they had. One evening, when she arrived later than usual, the cafe was empty, except for him. He was sitting by the counter, writing in the notebook she had given him. When he saw her, he smiled. "You're late," he said teasingly. "Blame traffic," she said. "Or maybe I just didn't want the day to end too quickly." He laughed softly. "That's a nice excuse." They talked for hours that night, long after the cafe closed. The city outside had quieted, and the sound of rain filled the silence between their words. She told him about her favorite childhood memory, how her father used to take her to small shops just like his, and how she always loved the smell of freshly brewed coffee even as a child. He told her how he learned to make perfect coffee by trial and error, burning countless cups before getting it right. And somewhere between their stories, their eyes met and lingered a little longer than before. Neither said anything, but something passed between them, unspoken, gentle, and real. When she finally stood up to leave, he walked her out again. The street was wet, the air cool. He held the door open for her and said, "Same time tomorrow?" She smiled softly. "I'll be here." As she drove home that night, she realized she wasn't just visiting the cafe for peace anymore. She was visiting because she missed him. The simplicity, the laughter, the honesty. He had become the quiet part of her day that made everything else bearable. And even though he had no idea who she really was, he treated her with the kind of respect and warmth she'd been craving for years. He didn't know she was a CEO, but somehow he already treated her like a queen. The connection between them kept growing, quiet and beautiful, like something that didn't need to be rushed. She kept visiting the cafe, and every time she did, it felt like stepping out of one world and entering another. A world where no one expected anything from her. A world where she could just be herself. She often told herself it was just a friendship, that the peace she felt around him was simply comfort, not love. But her heart disagreed. Every time she saw him smile, every time he remembered how she liked her coffee, every time he spoke about life with that calm, kind tone, she felt something more. Something she hadn't felt in years. At work, her life was different. Her company was expanding fast. Her face was on magazines and business shows. People looked up to her, admired her success, and feared her decisions. She had worked hard for this, but it was lonely at the top. The more her world grew, the emptier it sometimes felt. Still, at the cafe, none of that mattered. There, she was just a woman who loved the smell of coffee and quiet evenings. One evening, when she entered, she found him sitting by the counter, looking through an old photo album. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "You're early today," he said. "I had a long day," she replied, setting down her bag. "Thought I'd end it with a good cup of peace." He chuckled softly. "One piece cappuccino coming up." She smiled at his words. He always found small ways to make her laugh. As he worked, she glanced at the photo album. "What's that?" she asked. He turned it around to show her. "Just some old memories. My mom used to take photos of everything. Birthdays, random days, even rainy mornings like this. I found this album while cleaning." She flipped through a few pages. There were pictures of a small house, smiling faces, and a younger version of him standing beside his mother. She could see love in those photos, simple, genuine love. "She must have been proud of you," she said quietly. He nodded. "She was. She used to say I had a good heart, even when I didn't have much else. I try to live up to that." She looked at him, thinking how rare that was, to find someone whose heart was so pure. in a world that often forgot kindness. That evening, when she went home, she couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he spoke, the way he smiled, it all stayed with her. She didn't want to admit it, but she was falling for him. Still, one thought kept bothering her. He didn't know who she really was. She had kept her secret for weeks now, afraid of what might happen if he found out. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she didn't want to lose what they had. She wanted to be loved for herself, not her success. But life has a way of revealing the truth when you least expect it. A few days later, she had an important interview scheduled with a well-known business channel. The interview went viral overnight. It was everywhere, her face on TV, online articles, social media. Her company was making headlines again. That same evening, she went to the cafe like usual. She was nervous, unsure of how he'd act if he had seen the interview. But when she walked in, he greeted her with the same smile. "You look tired," he said. "Long day again?" She nodded, trying to keep her tone casual. "You could say that." "Then your usual coffee," he said, already preparing it. For a few moments, everything felt normal. The same warm light, the same smell of roasted beans, the same gentle peace. She almost believed nothing had changed. But then, as he handed her the cup, the cafe door opened and two young men walked in. They sat at a nearby table, talking loudly. One of them pointed toward her and said, "Hey, isn't that the CEO from the news? I saw her interview this morning. She runs that big company downtown." Her heart froze. Adil looked at them, then back at her. At first, confusion crossed his face. Then realization. His expression shifted, surprise, disbelief, maybe even a little hurt. You're that CEO?" he asked slowly. She opened her mouth but couldn't speak. The silence between them felt heavy. Finally, she nodded. "Yes, I was going to tell you, but I didn't know how." He took a small step back, trying to process it. "All this time, you've been sitting here talking about life like it's simple, but you're one of the most powerful people in the city." She reached out slightly. "I didn't want to hide it from you, I just wanted to be normal. To be seen as me, not as my title." He didn't respond at first. He just looked down, his face unreadable. "You could have told me," he said quietly. "I wouldn't have treated you any different." "I know," she said softly. "But most people do. I didn't want to lose what we had." He nodded slowly, still looking away. "I get it. But I guess I just feel a little foolish now. I was giving free coffee to someone who could probably buy the whole cafe." His words weren't angry, but they hurt her more than she expected. "It was never about money," she whispered. "You made me feel human again. You treated me like I mattered, not like a position." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just wish you trusted me enough to tell me the truth." She wanted to explain, to make him understand, but the words felt useless. The warmth between them had turned into a wall of silence. She finished her coffee quietly and stood up. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to hurt you." He gave a small nod. "I know." When she left that evening, the air outside felt colder than usual. The streetlights blurred through her tears as she walked to her car. She had everything: success, money, power. But in that moment, she had never felt so small. The next few days, she didn't visit the cafe. She stayed buried in work, trying to convince herself that it was for the best. But no matter how many meetings she attended or awards she received, she couldn't shake the ache in her chest. She missed the quiet. She missed his laughter. She missed being seen. Adil, too, felt the emptiness. Every time he poured a cup of coffee, he looked at the door, half expecting her to walk in. But she didn't. The seat by the window stayed empty and the cafe felt quieter than before. He told himself it didn't matter, that their worlds were too different. She belonged to a place he could never reach. But deep down he knew the truth. What they had was real, even if it came from two very different worlds. One evening, while closing the cafe, he turned on the small TV behind the counter. Her face appeared again, this time at a charity event. She was giving a speech about helping underprivileged students start their careers. She spoke about kindness, humility, and how success meant nothing without compassion. He watched in silence. When she smiled during the speech, it was the same smile she wore every time she walked into his cafe. And suddenly he realized she hadn't lied to hurt him. She had only wanted to be free from her world, to find something real. The next morning, when he opened the cafe, he noticed a small envelope on the counter. It was addressed to him. Inside, there was a note in her handwriting. It read, "I never wanted to hide who I was. I just wanted you to see me for who I am inside, not what people see on TV. Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to be human again. You once told me everyone deserves to be treated like a queen, but you were the one who made me feel that way." He read the note twice, then folded it carefully and placed it inside his notebook. He didn't know if she'd ever come back, but something inside him hoped she would. That evening, he made her usual coffee and placed it on the counter near the window, just in case. Hours passed. The cafe began to close and the cup sat untouched. But for the first time in days, he smiled. Because even though she wasn't there, he knew something had changed between them. Sometimes, the truth can shake people apart before it brings them back together. And deep down, he knew their story wasn't over yet. Days turned into weeks after that night, and she stayed away from the cafe. At first, she told herself it was better this way, that maybe their worlds were too far apart and some connections weren't meant to last. But no matter how much she tried to convince herself, her heart didn't agree. Every evening when she passed that street, she slowed down near the cafe without meaning to. The lights inside still glowed warmly, just like before. She could almost see him there behind the counter, humming quietly while cleaning the cups. But she never went in. Fear held her back. She didn't know if he would want to see her again. Inside his cafe, life went on, but it wasn't the same. The laughter, the warmth, the small joy that filled the air whenever she came. Everything felt a little dimmer without her. He tried to hide it from others, but people noticed. The old couple who visited every morning asked why he looked tired. The regulars told him the place felt quieter. He just smiled and said he was fine, but deep down, he missed her more than he wanted to admit. He kept her note in his pocket, folded carefully, like something too precious to lose. Every now and then he would take it out, read it, and then put it back. He didn't know if she'd ever return, but a part of him hoped she would. One rainy afternoon, just like the first day they met, she sat by her office window, watching raindrops slide down the glass. She had spent the whole day in meetings, talking about numbers, projects, and partnerships. Everyone around her seemed proud of her success, but she felt empty inside. The one place that had made her feel alive was the small cafe, and the one person who made her feel understood was the man she had lost because of a truth she couldn't hide forever. She closed her laptop, stood up, and took a deep breath. Enough running. She had faced boardrooms filled with powerful people without fear. Surely she could face one person who had shown her nothing but kindness. The cafe bell chimed softly as she walked in that evening. The air smelled the same. Freshly brewed coffee, warm pastries, a little hint of cinnamon. Her heart beat faster as her eyes searched for him. He was there behind the counter stacking cups. For a second he froze when he saw her, like he wasn't sure she was real. Then he looked away, pretending to focus on something else. "Hi," she said quietly. He nodded without meeting her eyes. "Hey." She stood there for a moment, unsure what to say next. The air between them felt heavier than before. Finally, she walked closer. "Can we talk?" He hesitated, then gestured toward a table. "Yeah, sure." They sat down, the silence stretching longer than either of them liked. Finally, she spoke. "I'm sorry for not telling you the truth earlier." He looked at her, his face calm but unreadable. "I wasn't angry because of who you are," he said softly. "I was just surprised. You talk about life like someone who's searching for peace, but you already have everything most people dream of." She sighed. "I have everything except peace. Except real people. You were the only one who made me forget who I was for a while. That's why I didn't tell you. I didn't want that to disappear." He leaned back, his eyes thoughtful. "You could have trusted me with the truth. I would have understood." "I know," she said quietly, "but I've seen how people change when they find out. They either get distant or they start pretending. I didn't want to lose what we had. I just wanted something real." He nodded slowly. "I get that. But it still hurt, you know? Because I thought we were honest with each other." She looked down, her voice trembling a little. "You were honest. I wasn't brave enough." For a few moments, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint music playing from the old speaker near the counter. Then he said, "You know, when I found out who you were, I didn't feel angry at first. I felt small, like I didn't belong in your world. You were out there changing lives, running companies, and I was just here making coffee." She looked up quickly. Don't say that. You make people feel seen. You make them feel human. That's something no company can do. You've changed my life more than you know. He held her gaze for a long moment. There was something in her eyes that made his heart soften again. The same sincerity he saw from the very beginning was still there, untouched by her status or title. I missed you, she whispered. He smiled faintly. I missed you too. Something in the air shifted. The tension began to fade. For the first time in weeks, they laughed again, quietly at first, then naturally like old times. They talked for hours that evening. She told him how she'd started her company from nothing, how she had faced failures, doubts, and loneliness along the way. He listened carefully, not out of curiosity, but out of genuine interest. He told her how he had been saving money to open his own cafe one day, even though progress was slow. She smiled. Maybe I could invest in it, she joked lightly. He raised an eyebrow. Only if you promise to be a silent partner, he teased. They both laughed. It felt good. Real. Before leaving that night, she said softly, Thank you for letting me explain. He nodded. Thank you for coming back. From that day, things between them slowly started to heal. It wasn't exactly like before, but it was something new, more honest, more open. She no longer hid who she was, and he no longer felt out of place. They found a rhythm again, one built on truth. She started visiting the cafe again, not as a stranger, but as someone who had earned her place there. Sometimes she'd bring her laptop and work quietly in her corner seat while he served customers. Other times they'd talk after closing, sharing stories and dreams like they used to. One evening, he told her about a competition for young entrepreneurs. They give funding for small businesses, he said. I'm thinking of applying. Her eyes lit up. You should. You're talented and your idea has heart, he smiled shyly. I'm not sure they'd take me seriously. I don't have a degree in business, but you don't need one, she said firmly. You have something better, passion. She helped him prepare for it. She reviewed his proposal, taught him how to organize his ideas, and even gave tips on presentation. But she never did the work for him. She wanted him to believe in himself. On the day of his presentation, she waited at the cafe, nervous like it was her own interview. When he returned, she saw the look on his face before he even spoke. I got it, he said, his voice full of disbelief. They're giving me the funding. She stood up, smiling widely. I knew you would. He laughed and hugged her without thinking, and for a moment everything stopped. The noise, the world, the weight of everything that had come before. It was just them. After that, their bond grew stronger, not because of love that was rushed, but because of trust that was rebuilt. He started planning his new cafe, and she supported him every step of the way, not with money, but with belief. One night, as they sat outside under the streetlights, he looked at her and said, You know, I used to think we came from two different worlds, but now I think maybe we were just lost in the same one. She smiled softly. Maybe we were both just looking for something real. He nodded. And maybe we found it. The wind blew gently, carrying the smell of coffee and rain through the air. She looked at him, thinking how strange life was, how a simple cup of coffee and a small act of kindness had changed everything. He had seen her pain when no one else did. He had spoken to her like a person when the world saw her as a name. And she had helped him believe that dreams could come true. That night, as they parted ways, neither said goodbye. They didn't need to. They both knew something new was beginning, something built not on secrets, but on truth and quiet understanding. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. He didn't know she was a CEO when they met. He just saw her heart, and now that he knew everything, he treated her the same way he always had, with kindness, respect, and warmth. The kind of love that didn't need fancy words or promises. The kind of love that simply stayed. Months passed since they had rebuilt their bond. Life had started to find a comfortable rhythm for both of them. She continued to manage her company, but now the weight felt lighter because she knew someone in the world saw her for who she truly was. He worked tirelessly on his cafe project, slowly transforming his dream into reality. And she was always there, not as a boss or benefactor, but as a friend and confidant who believed in him completely. It was on one quiet Saturday morning that she found herself walking down the familiar street once more. The air was crisp, and sunlight reflected off the wet pavement from the rain that had fallen the night before. Her steps slowed as she approached the cafe. now bustling with customers who had clearly discovered its charm. The smell of fresh coffee and baked goods welcomed her like an old friend, and she smiled, feeling at home. He was behind the counter, wearing his apron, focused on pouring coffee with the same careful precision he always had. When he looked up and saw her, his face lit up, a smile breaking across his features that reached his eyes and made her heart skip a beat. "You're here early," he said with a teasing grin. "I didn't want to miss this," she replied, taking a seat at their usual table by the window. He approached her carrying a cup of her favorite blend. "Your usual," he said, placing it gently in front of her. She looked at the cup and smiled. "Thank you," she said softly. He leaned against the counter, watching her as she took a sip. "You look happy today," he said after a moment. "I am," she admitted. "Things are going well, and I think it's because I finally have someone I can trust, someone who sees me for me." He smiled, a quiet, contented smile. "I'm glad," he said simply. The cafe was busy, but in their little corner it felt like the rest of the world didn't exist. They talked about small things. The new pastries he had tried, a funny customer who had spilled coffee earlier, even the plans for his new cafe space. But underneath the light conversation, there was a deeper understanding that had grown between them. They didn't need to talk about it openly. Both of them felt it. The connection that had started with small gestures of kindness and had now become something stronger, something real. After closing, they stayed behind, sitting at their table in silence. The lights were dimmed, the cafe empty except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of the chairs. She watched him clean the counter, noticing how careful he was, how every motion was filled with purpose. "You know," she said quietly, "I never thought I could feel this, normal. After everything I've done, after all the expectations, I never imagined someone like you could make me feel at peace." He paused and looked at her. "You make me feel that way too," he admitted. "Like I can be more than where I started. Like I can dream bigger." She reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. It felt natural, comforting, as if they had always belonged in this moment. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Scared that someday all of this us might not work. That the world outside will change things again." He squeezed her hand gently. "We'll face it together. You and me, not as a CEO and a barista, not as people from different worlds, but as us." She looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes, not from sadness but from relief. Someone finally understood her. Someone finally cared without conditions. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of joy and planning. He opened the new cafe, a modest place with warm lights, wooden furniture, and the comforting smell of coffee that lingered in every corner. She was there every day during the opening, not to help with finances or management, but to be present, to celebrate his dream coming true. And he was there for her too, listening when she needed to talk about challenges at work, offering advice, or simply holding her hand when the stress became too heavy. One evening, after a long day, they sat outside the new cafe. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air smelled of fresh pastries and the faint scent of rain from earlier. He looked at her, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know," he said softly, "I never expected any of this. Meeting you, getting to know you, watching you smile without the weight of the world on your shoulders. It's changed everything for me." She smiled, leaning her head slightly toward him. "Me too," she admitted. "I thought I needed power and success to be happy, but now I see it's people like you who make life worth living." He reached out, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "You deserve to be happy, and I'm not going anywhere. I want to be with you. Not because of who you are in the world, but because of who you are when no one else is watching." Her heart swelled. She had spent years hiding, guarding herself against people who only saw her as a CEO. But he had always seen her, always cared, always treated her like she mattered. "I don't want to hide anymore," she whispered. "I want to be completely honest with you. I want you to know everything about me and still stay." He smiled, his eyes soft and warm. "I'm already here, and I'm staying." For the first time, she felt completely safe. She didn't need walls or masks anymore. She could be herself entirely. The weeks turned into months, and their relationship grew naturally. They celebrated small victories together, comforted each other through failures, and learned to share life's mundane moments with joy. Every evening at the cafe, they found laughter and quiet peace. One rainy evening, much like the first time they met, they sat outside under the awning of his cafe, sipping coffee and watching the rain. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence. "You know," she said softly, "I never thought someone could change my life without even realizing it." He chuckled. "I didn't even know I could either." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "You treated me like a queen before you knew anything about me, and now I think I finally understand what it means to be truly cared for." He reached out, brushing a raindrop off her cheek. "You've changed me too," he said. "You've taught me that people aren't just their circumstances. That kindness and honesty matter more than anything else. And that love can start anywhere, even in a small cafe on a rainy day." She smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The world outside could be harsh, unforgiving, and demanding, but here with him, she had found home. Months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, he surprised her at the cafe. He had a small box in his hands. She looked at him curiously as he sat down across from her. "I know we've both worked hard and life has been unpredictable," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But there's one thing I know for certain. I want to spend my life with you, not as a CEO and a barista, not as people from different worlds, but as two people who found each other when it mattered the most." Her heart raced as he opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "Will you be with me? Not for the titles or the money, but for us?" Tears filled her eyes and she nodded, unable to speak at first. Finally, she whispered, "Yes, of course." He smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger. It wasn't about grandeur or showiness. It was about honesty, love, and trust, the kind that grows quietly and deeply over time. They embraced, sitting together as the morning sunlight streamed through the cafe windows. The world outside continued as it always had, but inside there was only warmth, peace, and the knowledge that they had found something rare and beautiful. From that day on, life didn't magically become perfect. Work was still demanding, challenges still came, and the outside world still judged and expected. But they faced it together. She never had to hide who she was again, and he never stopped treating her with the same kindness and respect he had shown from the very beginning. Sometimes, she thought back to that first rainy evening, the moment she had walked into his cafe without anyone knowing who she really was. She had come looking for a simple cup of coffee, not expecting her life to change, and yet that small ordinary act had brought her someone who saw her heart, cared for her completely, and treated her like a queen even before he knew her story. He didn't know she was a CEO when they met. He only knew her as a kind, thoughtful, and genuine person. And in the end, that was all that truly mattered. They laughed, they loved, and they built a life together, not defined by titles, money, or status, but by the quiet, unshakable bond of two hearts who found each other in the simplest of ways. And every time she looked at him, she smiled, knowing that sometimes the most extraordinary love starts in the most ordinary places. The cafe remained their sanctuary, their safe haven, the place where it all began. And no matter what the world brought, they knew one thing for certain: they had each other, and that was enough. Love, after all, had little to do with status. It had everything to do with seeing someone, truly seeing them, and choosing to stay. And that is exactly what he did.